Hi, I'm Sam from Easy Sleep Solutions, and I am a trained sleep coach for both adults and children. And so my job basically is helping people get the sleep that they need and they deserve. We all know that eating the right things and getting plenty of exercise is really, really important for our general well-being and our health. But the third pillar of health that we all overlook so easily is sleep. And actually, if we're not getting enough sleep, then the choices we're more likely to make bad food choices, and we're also not going to have the energy and the motivation to exercise when we need to as well. So making sure that we're looking after ourselves on every level, not just making sure that we're getting our 5 a day and making sure that we're getting our 10,000 steps, is really making sure that we get the amount of sleep that we need each night. So what I'd like to do is just talk through a few tips on things that we might be doing inadvertently that can sort of sabotage our sleep that we maybe don't actually realise. So I believe knowledge is power. So if we understand what happens when we do things, then we can make that informed decision on whether or not we're going to do it again, basically. So the top one is probably alcohol, because I'm definitely not teetotal, but I do know that alcohol really messes with our sleep. It basically can plunge us into sleep quite quickly. So our sleep onset latency, to use a fancy term, basically the amount of time it takes us to fall asleep, is significantly reduced. But the difficulty is we then plunge into deep sleep, which is good because we do need a good amount of deep sleep. But the problem is, depending on how much we've had to drink, we then have more deep sleep compared to dream sleep. And dream sleep is really important for us cognitively and mentally. So dream sleep is where we are sort of basically emotionally venting to ourselves, and we're just making sense of things. We're taking stuff from our short-term memory, putting it into our long-term memory, and really sort of consolidating it. So if we're drinking lots and we're doing it very frequently, the difficulty is we're not getting the quality and quantity of sleep that we need. And that's why often if we do a long haul flight or something, we can then almost feel hungover, and it's actually the sleeplessness or the lack of quality sleep that makes us feel so rubbish when we've been drinking a lot. So as I say, absolutely not saying don't drink, just be aware that alcohol does really make a big difference to our sleep. So trying to sort of limit the frequency with which we drink, because of course the more often that we drink, our tolerance then builds, and we're then more likely to need to have more to get the same effect. So trying to make sure that you have as many days not drinking as drinking is really good, and also sort of just being mindful of how much we're actually drinking as well. The other thing is caffeine. Again, I'm absolutely not saying don't drink coffee. I've just finished one, but caffeine is a cumulative effect. So it stays in our system for about 10 hours really. So if you're having a cup of coffee late in the evening, that caffeine is still going to be in your system. And the way that caffeine works is that we have hormones in our body that tell us that we're tired, and it's a pressure that builds up and builds up. But what caffeine does is it blocks the receptors in the brain telling us that we're tired. So although we're still tired, the brain doesn't think that we are, so then we feel that we can function and we can carry on normally. But the more caffeine we have, it just kind of layers and layers and layers upon itself, and so then obviously it takes longer to come out of our system. It's also worth remembering that decaf doesn't mean no caff, so it's still got about 30% of the caffeine that regular coffee or tea has as well. And black tea still has about 68% of the caffeine that a coffee has as well. So it's about 100 milligrams of caffeine in a coffee. So if you're going to Starbucks or Costa or any coffee shop, most coffees there have a double shot. So you're then looking at 200 milligrams just in one coffee. So if you're having 2 or 3 of those a day, that's actually quite a significant amount of coffee or caffeine that you're having. So it's worth trying to limit your caffeine intake so it's just in the mornings really, because then it's got enough time to work out your system by the time you go to bed. And it's also worth thinking about what else has caffeine in. So green tea has quite a lot of caffeine in, and chocolate has a lot of caffeine in as well. So the darker the chocolate, the more caffeine. So, it could be all very well that you decide to cut out coffee and tea and energy drinks. but you're still sat there drinking some really good quality dark chocolate in the evenings, that's going to impact your sleep as well. So it's not necessarily the sugar, it's the caffeine in the chocolate that does it. So it's really worth thinking about what has caffeine and at what time of day we're having it as well. It can become a bit of a vicious cycle as well, that we then start to have more caffeine because we're not sleeping very well, and then maybe we self-medicate with alcohol because we know that alcohol is going to help us get off to sleep. So it can just become this really vicious cycle. Obviously, if you're drinking a lot of caffeine or you're drinking a lot of alcohol, then don't just stop suddenly. You need to wean yourself off. But it's definitely worth thinking about trying to sort of limit how much caffeine and how much alcohol you're having with regards to your sleep. I've also already mentioned really about exercise. So exercising more days than we don't exercise each week is actually really beneficial for our sleep, and the timings of it can make quite a big difference as well. Some people, personally, I like to get up and just get it done. That works best for me. There's research to suggest that sort of early afternoon is really good, but essentially we want to make sure that we're not doing it too close to bedtime. So within about 2 hours of bedtime, you don't really want to be doing anything that's going to really get your heart rate up and get your body temperature high, because both of those are sort of counterintuitive for sleep, really. So trying to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing isn't going to get your heart rate up. So something like yoga, some gentle yoga or Pilates is okay, especially if it relaxes you. But doing a HIIT class, an hour before you're expecting to go to bed probably isn't really going to help you sleep. They do say that resistance and cardio exercise are particularly good for sleep as well. So again, it's worth bearing that in mind if you are wanting to start to exercise and you're not sure where to start or what to do. They could be quite a good place to start. When it comes to technology use, mobile phones and things like that, I'm not going to talk about the blue light that's in the media, because actually there's research or recent research that suggests that actually it's not quite as harmful to our sleep as they once thought. But actually, what is harmful to our sleep is when we are being interactive with that technology. So whether that's a computer game, whether it's sitting and scrolling on our phones, at the moment, if we are sat in bed looking at Facebook and we've got friends who, school friends who are living in Australia and they're living the life of Riley, sat on a beach, and we've kind of been stuck inside, that's not really going to put you in a great place before you go to sleep. So it's fine to use technology before bed, but try and use try not to use interactive technology. So anything that's involving you to use it is really, really important. So, if you want to watch TV, that's fine. Try and have the sound down fairly low so it's not too arousing. If you can dim the screen a bit so it's not too bright, again, that's absolutely fine. But if you wanted to read a book on your phone or something, then, that's fine, as long as it's not a really bright light, just because that is naturally going to wake you up a bit. There's also something called revenge bedtime procrastination, which I think we've probably all done at some point. And that is basically where we stay up, even though we know that we shouldn't, because we kind of feel that we need that time. I'm a mum to 2 small children, and I know I did it so much when my kids were really small. Because I just needed that time. I needed to feel like an adult and have that grown-up time on my own and be able to sit and drink wine and watch a box set or whatever, which is fine, but obviously it's going to really negatively impact on your sleep. And so it's often worth thinking about other times in the day that you can try and sort of claw back that time, really. Whether it's getting up a little bit earlier and going for a walk, or doing something else just to have that me time, or shut the door and have a bath. Find some other time that isn't going to impact on your sleep quite so much. Stress is obviously a really major factor for so many people when they can't sleep, and actually unfortunately, I could have talked for a whole 10 minutes just on stress, really. But there are definitely ways that we can help. There's something called constructive worry. So that is finding some time, maybe between about 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the evening, where you think about the 3 main things that are really concerning you at the time, and trying to work out ways around it, trying to think what you can do to try and help what's going on really. Try and come up with an action plan, try and write a to-do list, that type of thing. And just being quite regimented in making sure that you give yourself that time each and every day can really help. Also, things like body scan techniques, there's lots available on the internet where it's basically mindfulness, just helping you to sort of focus your mind and practice pushing those troublesome thoughts away really. I'm not saying that you need to forget about the thoughts. I'm just saying that actually there's a time and a place, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're laid there thinking about stuff, there's very little that you can do. So trying to train yourself to think, well, actually, I've already thought about this, I've already written my to-do list, I've already worked out how I'm going to action this in the morning, I just need to let it go now, and I need to get some sleep. Also, something really fundamental is having a routine. With children, it's all about the routine. It's making sure that they have their nap at the right time, they go to bed at the right time. But actually, we are creatures of habit, and so for us adults, it's just as important. So trying to make sure that you get up at the same time and you go to bed at the same time every night just helps our natural body clock to kind of sync really. And so naturally we'll start to feel more tired approaching bedtime, and we'll naturally wake up more refreshed in the morning as well. Again, I'm not saying you have to go to bed at 10 o'clock every single night, especially now that things are starting to open up and we can go out and we can do stuff. But just the majority of the time, if you can try and make sure that you're sticking to a fairly consistent schedule, then that should really, really help. Of course, this has been a real whirlwind of a talk on things that we can do to help our sleep. But as I say, I am a sleep coach, and this is what I do, and I'm really passionate about it. So if you are having difficulties with your sleep, please do get in touch. My website is easysleepsolutions.co.uk. I would love to hear from you, and I offer a free telephone conversation to chat through the difficulties that you're facing. And if there's free advice that I can give you there and then that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, we can discuss how we can work together to get you sleeping, because sleep is not a luxury.